Okay, we're live. Beautiful. And let's just add Instagram. Perfect. All right. What's going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. I am Nyla Simone, and today we have a very special guest joining us. We have Jordan Young, who is a GMS award-winning music supervisor and sync agent based out of LA. He is a freelance member of the Guild Music Supervisors and an active national member of the TV Academy. His sync agency, Fort Clarington, specializes in one-stop hip-hop and electronic music from frontline artists and has obtained dozens of syncs for his clients and original productions for Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV, MTV, the CW, the NFL Network, and more. His work as a music supervisor primarily focuses on unscripted TV, indie films, and documentaries, and his music supervision work has been seen on Netflix, Peacock, HBO, Stars, OWN, AMC, and film festivals worldwide. Thank you for joining us, Jordan.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. Now, for people who aren't familiar with exactly syncs are, what is syncs? How can you explain it to people?
Sure. So sync is actually short for synchronization. So if you think about having a song and having it paired or matched with some other kind of visual medium. So I think the easiest way to think about it is just music in media of in any way, shape, or form. That could be TV, film, video games, advertising. There's plenty of new media and stuff like that that exists now. So, social media, content, or things like that. I've always thought that it meant, music paired with a visual medium. That said, that's been challenged a little bit in more recent years because people are starting to license music for podcasts. So if
Mm.
music is licensed for a podcast, it's technically I guess there are some podcasts that have a visual component and have a video recording, right? But a lot of podcasts are also audio only. So I think the word sync still applies, but it's having a song fixed within a linear format or a linear medium, within the podcast. So either way, synchronization.
Did you include social media in that too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of social media stuff has, uh, anything on like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever. There's really always a visual component, right? So whatever song is selected and potentially licensed for that. I think that definitely qualifies. And I have gotten a few syncs before with, major companies that actually did pay a fee. That's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a wild, wild west right now, but there is a lot of like misinformation and misunderstanding about how social media and other things work in regards to music rights. There's a big difference between user generated content and branded content. And even some people that are experts in the space don't know that they're supposed to be paying for music if it's branded content and if it's being used to promote a product or a service or something like that. And there have been a lot more cases in the past year or two around that, major labels and publishers that have been suing these big companies that have been using unlicensed music in their social media content. So I mean, I think there's obviously going to be a lot more of that in the future, but definitely the realm of like what sync is and the different places that it can be applied is ever growing and ever evolving for sure.
I see. Wow, I didn't realize that. Can you explain the difference to me between a music supervisor and a sync agent?
Yeah, for sure. So a music supervisor is someone who's generally hired by productions to help them with the music rights on their projects. So, if you're working on a TV show or a movie, for example, it's like that TV or film production would hire a music supervisor to help them with all of their music rights. And that can include a ton of different things depending on what the project is. Like it's all case by case, everything is bespoke, and the needs of different projects vary greatly, but either way, they're working on the side of the production to help, source and license music for the production, generally speaking. A sync agent or is like a music rep. They represent the rights to the music, and they're generally pitching music to music supervisors or other licensees, whoever that might be. And there are a lot of different people that could be considered music reps. A sync agent is one. if they work at a sync agency. Otherwise, there's, labels, there's publishers, there's libraries, sometimes even managers or people like that that have, extensive connections and experience in the sync world and in music licensing. So ultimately, there's the side of music supervisors and licensees, and then there's the side of music reps and rights holders. It's another way to think of it that's a little bit more like streamlined and nutshelled is like, a music supervisor is a buyer and a music rep or a sync agent is a seller.
Mm. But both require good relationships.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Like this is very much a relationship-driven industry, just like a lot of things in music and entertainment and everything like that. And the most important thing too is that they're really built on trust. Like music reps are generally considered like trusted sources to music supervisors or other licensees. Like, and trust is a big part of it because when it comes to music licensing, like there's potentially a high level of liability that comes down to it. It's like you're licensing intellectual property and you're working with copyrights. And, if something happens and there's a claim or, copyright infringement occurs, if you've been hired to help get music rights on behalf of this major media company or whatever, it's like they could be facing a big lawsuit, as a result of that. So when that's the case, it's like there's a lot of trust and a lot of careful consideration that needs to come down to it. It's like there are other opportunities that might exist out there in press or radio or social media or other things like that where, the level of liability is a lot less of an issue than working in music licensing and saying. So that is a really big part of it. And I think that's why, representation for, independent artists and stuff like that is so important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna take it to the chat before I go on to my next question.
Sure.
Um, what Lalida has to say says I have my notepad ready. Sierra Jordan says, looking forward to hearing from your expertise, Jordan. Universal King says, good day, everyone. Songwriter from Tennessee. District asks, will there be a Q&A session? And yeah, feel free to drop your questions in the chat as I ask Jordan these questions. And if there's like a follow-up question that you want, I'll make sure to read it off. But okay, so my next question is, how exactly does the process work? And is there like a typical timeline for sync opportunities? Like, is it first come, first serve, or do they have someone in mind already? Like, how does it usually go?
Great question, and it goes a lot of different ways. At the end of the day, so much of this, like like I said, it's all bespoke. Like so many things are case by case, and it just depends on what the project is and who's involved with it, and all the different factors that come into play. Um, so with that in mind, it is kind of hard to give a specific timeline or talk about it too specifically without like having other details or things like that. But I generally will say like it moves fast. I mean, a big part of like working in sync is like being at the ready at all times. It's like you don't want to like pitch something and then think like, oh, we'll figure it out if there's interest in it, or like, oh, like we'll get moving and then we'll figure things out. It's like you need to have all your ducks in a row and everything all lined up and ready to go before you even send it to anyone. I mean, that's a really important aspect of it for sure. So it's like having all your splits worked out, all your ownership and rights information, having a very clear understanding of what all that looks like is a very important introductory part of the process. Be, registered with a PRO and have your publishing entities all set up. I mean, that's always really important. Have instrumentals of your songs available and have stems. I mean, that's a very like crucial and just kind of introductory part of it. If no one is really going to even consider licensing your song if you don't have an instrumental available. I mean, it's always a pretty crucial part of an editor working with your song and being able to cut it into a scene is having an instrumental available. Because a lot of times, if a song is used in a scene, there's going to be a lot of dialogue or sound effects or other things that happen throughout the scene. And if your vocals are competing with this dialogue, it can create an issue and it can kind of be a deal breaker. So it helps a lot for that. And also just having the flexibility for an editor to be able to kind of like edit your song and cut it up and arrange it the way that they want to. Having an instrumental version or even better stems is going to give them a lot more versatility to be able to work with that. So those are kind of really basic things that you should have right at the ready before even pitching any of your songs to anyone. Having lyric sheets is really helpful too. It's not always a total necessity or requirement, but it is really helpful. And the more of these assets and the more of these things that you have ready to go, the more it's going to work in your favor for sure.
So pretty much come organized.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like splits, metadata, stems and instrumentals, lyric sheets. Like obviously all of the rights information is super important too. Like if you have collaborators and you haven't talked to them about splits for your songs yet, like that's the first thing you need to do. Absolutely. Is like know what rights in your music you own or control. It's actually like surprising how often some indie artists don't even know that, or they're like wrong about it, where they release their album on some like small record label and they actually don't have control of their masters and they don't even realize that that's the case. Or maybe they signed some little like publishing administration deal with the company and they didn't realize that they signed away exclusive sync rights to their publishing, or something like that. So it's always really important to like keep very close track of any of the deals that you sign and know what your splits are with your collaborators and have that all like totally buttoned up from the jump.
That makes a lot of sense. In a scenario where an artist did sell their sync rights to their label, is it possible for that deal to still go through?
So yeah, like potentially, like if an artist has a deal with a record label and they signed their rights away exclusively, you could still license it through the label for sure.
Okay.
The only potential concern with that is like now you're negotiating with the label and you're at the mercy of them. And some labels or some companies, they have pretty high floors with what they're willing to accept in terms of fees or other terms or things like that. Because anytime you involve a music rep or other companies in, this fee then gets divided that many more ways. It's like the pie gets smaller and smaller the more people that are involved with it. So when that's the case, they might say like, we're not willing to license for anything less than 5K all in or 10K all in or something, even though the artist, they're happy with $1,000 or something like that, just for example. So like there's more red tape involved and there's more people to negotiate with. And that can also slow down the process as well. So if you're like, hey, I've got this cut that locks in the next 2 days and we need an answer, and your label reps are slow to respond because they've got a bunch of emails to deal with or whatever the case is, like it complicates the process a little bit more. And by all means, I'm not saying it's bad to sign with a label or anything, because some labels can be really proactive about pitching your music for syncs, so they can actually be very good at procuring those opportunities for you in the first place. But at the end of the day, it's just good to know like what deals you've signed and what the situation is with the rights to your music, and obviously knowing who you're working with for sure.
That's true. That's very true. I'm gonna take it to chat. Lottie Daw says so much good info, and then I see two really good questions. One from District, who said, would you suggest cold emailing supervisors if you don't have a sync agent?
I mean, you're welcome to try. I would say have very modest expectations about how successful you're going to be, because music supervisors do get a lot of submissions, even from sync agents and music reps that they know. It's like, honestly, I have a hard time even keeping up with all the emails and all the music that come in from all the different trusted sources I have, let alone from new people or new artists that I haven't even met or heard before. So I mean, you're welcome to try. Like, by all means, shoot your shot. Like, I would just say, like, have very modest expectations of that. And if you are going to email people, like cold email music supervisors or whoever, like, make sure that you do your research. Like, be well researched and know like who they are and what projects they've worked on and how they operate and things like that. Like, that's if you can show someone that like you actually know who they are and that you're well researched, and that you've got your ducks in a row, that you've got, all your splits worked out, that you've got all your assets and metadata ready, and you've got everything that they're going to need to just move with the music immediately, that's going to help them take you a lot more seriously. One thing, don't ever like email someone and say, hey, is it cool if I send music your way? Or don't ask if it's okay to make a submission. If you're going to do it, just do it, honestly. Like, it kind of pegs you as an amateur if you ask someone if you can send them music, because like no one's going to respond and be like, yeah, sure, go ahead and send it, because that's just one more interaction, like one more back and forth that you have to have. If anything, like, send a well-researched, professionally written email. Make it brief, but make sure that you can prove that you've done your research and that you've been thorough about everything. Let them know the rights information. Send a link to where they can stream and download the music if they wanted to. And then, maybe if they're feeling in a giving mood, or if they're open-minded that day, or if your email is compelling enough, maybe they'll listen to it. And if they listen to it and it's really good, then maybe they'll be willing to respond. I mean, I think that's the best shot you probably have with just cold emailing people. Otherwise, obviously the other best way to do it is to get representation. Like look into some sync agencies or some music libraries, or labels or publishers that have a good history with sync and have good relationships established there, and email them and see if they're accepting new clients, or if they're willing to work with you. And that said, I would say take the same approach with them too. It's like write a professional email that shows that you have all your information buttoned up in terms of ownership and rights, and do a little research on them and try to demonstrate that you know who they are and how they operate and things like that. And you'll probably be a lot more likely getting a response from a music rep than a music supervisor, to be honest. But I mean, by all means, feel free to shoot your shot either way. It's like a big part of this industry in general is just the hustle, being persistent and taking a lot of initiative and being proactive and putting yourself out there. So by all means.
I do love your emphasis on sending a professional email, because I do feel like in a position like yours, you almost lose like that human aspect, because they just want to get to like what they want from you.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Like if you do just the generic, like copy and paste email and send it to a bunch of people, like it's super obvious. People can tell right away, and like that's not going to get a response for sure.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, someone else in the comment asked, okay, this is Hayden McHigh, and it said, is there a place for artists to connect with sync agents? I live in Canada, and I am stuck sending emails, which feels impersonal.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I feel like you do have to, like, kind of like I just said, like take a lot of initiative, be able to do a lot of research, like try to find out who some of these companies are, and like reach out to them in a personalized way. I think one of the best things that would probably be good to do is like think about what kind of music you make. Like obviously there are different agencies that rep different styles and different sounds, or kind of have their own sweet spots. I mean, that's definitely something that music supervisors look out for, is like, okay, if I need like a really specific type of music, or a really something that checks a very specific box, like who can I go to that might have that? So like that could be hip hop, it could be certain styles of international music, it could be vintage, doo-wop music or whatever. I mean, there's so many different sounds and styles and genres and things that might be needed in a particular production. So if you can find a music rep that seems to specialize in whatever style or genre you make, like that's probably going to be a good fit. So if you can, try to find a couple artists that you think sound similar to you, probably like bigger artists or just whoever, and see who represents their music, and maybe reach out to that company and see if it would be a good fit. I mean, that's not a bad jumping off point. But yeah, there's a lot of research that you can do to find out who these different companies are, and look into them. Something that I always have liked to do, and when I first was getting started, and even today, is like to watch a movie and then look at the end credits roll, and you can see all the different music that's been licensed in the production, and see like what these songs are and who wrote them and who represents them. And sometimes, and more often than not, it'll have the licensors that are listed. A lot of times it might be a major label or a publisher, but sometimes it'll say like by arrangement with whatever sync agency or whatever other third-party licensor was involved. So that's a cool way to kind of look at what syncs have happened, especially if you think it's different, or especially if you think it's like similar to music that you make, and seeing who the company is.
We got to get back to reading the credits. I agree. Let me just show some love to the chat, and I'm going to go back to my questions because there's a lot of questions piling up. But hello, Clafmatic. Thank you for joining. Bo Williams says he loves your work. Thank you for joining from YouTube.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Likewise, for sure. If anyone knows Bo Williams, he's been in the sync game for a long time, for sure. He's a very successful artist in this space, so he'd be a good person to look after as an example of how to do it.
Oh, awesome. Hold on, let me put his tweet back up just so you guys can see. Bo Williams. That's his name on YouTube right there if you guys are interested. And then there's one more positive tweet that I saw. All right. Now I'm going to get back to my questions and then I'll get back to the chat. I just don't want to run out of time, chat. Sorry. But my next question was, what typically determines what a sync placement is worth? And how do you know if the deal is fair or if there's like any red flags that artists should look for before signing a sync deal?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. I feel like there's two parts of it, so I'll try to get to both. And if I forget one, then just get me back on track for sure.
Got you.
So what dictates, the fee of like a sync or something like that is really going to be based on the production budget and more specifically the
Mhm.
music budget of the production. Obviously, like we're kind of all, at the mercy of the resources that we've been given. So obviously a lot of things like unscripted TV or indie films or things like that are going to pay a lot less than a big budget studio film or like a national ad campaign or something like that. So that's the most important factor of it first and foremost. Otherwise, like sure, like the stature of the artist and who represents their music has a lot to do with it too. Like a lot of times, if you're dealing with a major label or a major publisher, like they have floors of how low that they'll ever be willing to go. If you're looking for broad rights from Sony or Universal or Warner Chappell or someone like that, it's like they're probably going to be quoting somewhere like 10K aside minimum. It's like there are certain floors where it's like a huge company like that has that kind of reputation and the kind of like bottom lines that they have, they just can't and won't go lower than that. But if you're working with, maybe a mid-level sync agency or someone like that, they're going to have a lot more flexibility. Likewise, if you're working with like a boutique sync agency or an independent artist or something like that, they're going to be highly flexible, or at least they should be. And again, a lot of that comes back to like what we said earlier about how like the more reps that are involved and the more people that need to take a piece of the pie, the larger the fee has to be in order for it to be worthwhile for everyone. Same thing goes for like samples. Like if there's a song that has a cleared sample, suddenly the rights get divided that much more, and the fee gets lower and lower because it has to be split so many different ways. So that's definitely a consideration. The different reps, whoever owns or controls the rights to that song, and then whatever the production is and whatever fees they have to work with.
And let's talk red flags. What are some
Mm.
potential things when, going through what the song is worth? What are red flags that people should look out for?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, I think that a lot of that is case by case too. It kind of depends who you are and where you're at with your career and what your goals
Yeah.
are. At the end of the day, like if you're brand new starting out when you've never really accomplished much in terms of the music business and you've never gotten to sync before and you've never had your music represented by a professional company, then like I think you should be pretty open-minded about what's coming your way, and don't expect some huge fee for a sync if this is your first one. So I think
Yeah.
viewing like at the end of the day, like music's a bandwagon industry. So I think it's helpful to be open and to be look at like resume building and like building a name for yourself and focusing on the slow burn rather than thinking that you're entitled to like a huge fee up front the first time you ever license a song. That said, if we're talking about like representation deals or something, like if you're working with a sync agency or another company who's going to rep the rights to your music, just make sure that you understand like what rights you're signing away and the different aspects of it. Like one of the main things to look out for is like a term. Usually a representation deal would be based on a certain term. Like 1 year is a pretty common term for a lot of sync agencies. They can sometimes go up to 2 or 3 years. I think anything too far beyond that is maybe a little bit of a stretch. Like if someone is going to be representing your song for 5 years or more, that's a fairly substantial amount of time. Likewise, if the term is perpetuity and they get the rights if they have the right to represent your music just forever, like that's probably not something that you would want to sign up for unless you're totally okay with that. And the same thing is like exclusive versus non-exclusive. I mean, and it's not like necessarily a red flag, like something to look to like to be a problem, but it's good to know what you're signing up for and know like if that's what the deal is that you're comfortable with that and you're okay with it. To be honest, a lot of like the big top tier sync agencies probably are going to want to rep your music exclusively, you know. But if they have a good history of getting a lot of syncs and getting good fees for them, then it that's not a bad deal. You know what I mean? So a lot of it is case by case and just depends on a lot of different factors and aspects.
Okay, I'm gonna ask this question. Well, I was gonna ask this question, but I see someone in the chat asked it, so I'm gonna bring it to stage. It's from Musa Bay on YouTube, and she said, "In regards to sending deliverables, is there a preference for unreleased versus released songs?"
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, I don't really have a preference in that personally. Some people do. I mean, I've definitely, you know, on the sync agency side, I've definitely gotten briefs from some people before that have said, like, we only want songs that have been released like this year or that will be released, you know, in this frame of time by the time the show comes out. So, I mean, that does come up sometimes, but there's not really any like standard on it overall. I mean, I've definitely licensed songs that have been out for several years, and you know, we sometimes like premiered new songs too. So it really just depends on everything on a case by case basis. But I think it doesn't hurt to like be open about that and say like, oh hey, the song is unreleased, or I'm planning to release this, you know, on this date, or you know, at the top of the new year, or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't hurt to mention that. And sometimes people might be into it and sometimes it might not really make a difference, you know.
A lot of this is case by case, I see.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so as far as getting paid, I know sometimes there's an upfront fee, but can you explain like performance royalties and when an artist can expect to get paid, like on the back end?
Yeah, 100%. So any of the upfront fees are generally going to be sync and master fees. You know, if you own and control both sets of rights and both of those are being licensed for a sync, for example, you'd be looking at sync and master fees, and those would be paid upfront by whoever the licensee is, who's probably going to be the production company who's making the show. And it's going to be paid out either to whoever the licensor is, and that could be you if you're licensing it directly. It could be your representatives if it's them, you know. So that's how those payments are going to flow. And uh, you know, payments generally don't come out until after something has aired, or maybe right before. And depending on the timeline of when you sign the deal versus when it actually comes out, you know, it could be several months. It could be like a month or two. You know, it really depends. Sometimes it can take at least 3 or 4 months for something to pay out after it airs. So it is definitely good to be patient on having those checks come your way if you can. But again, all case by case. Like, there are some things where, you know, I've licensed something and it's paid out within a month. There's sometimes I've waited like the better part of a year or more to actually get the check. So it can sometimes be slow, and that's for the upfronts. You know, if we're talking about performance royalties, you know, those are residuals that are paid out through your PROs, and that's going to be ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, like whoever you're affiliated with. And those are pretty slow as well. Those organizations, the PROs are very like, you know, bogged down organizations where they work on relatively small crews considering all the data and bandwidth that they have to process. They tend to work on fairly, you know, shoestring budgets as well. So, you know, there's a lot that has to go into that. Like, production companies are supposed to submit cue sheets to the PROs within 90 days of an episode airing. So, like for a TV anyway, for example. So if something airs on TV, it's supposed to, you know, the production company is supposed to submit it in the cue sheet within 90 days. And then after that, it'll be processed within like the coming quarter or something like that. So performance royalties can sometimes be 6 months or more behind, you know, or, you know, I mean, everything's paid out on a quarterly basis through the PROs, right? So, and they have, and you can check online, they have their like distribution schedules that are like, you know, this is the date for this year, this quarter that, you know, domestic writers are paid out. And this is international writers. And then a couple weeks later is domestic publishers and whatever. So there is a schedule, you know, and you can definitely keep an eye on that. But either way, performance royalties on the back end, those they take a while too. But so yeah, I guess patience is key to have as part of this too, for sure.
Patience is a virtue. Got it. Okay. Now you talked about like television and film, but do royalties differ for like streaming services like Netflix and Hulu versus TV broadcasting?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Does the royalties differ for like a streaming service versus like broadcast TV royalties?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Yep.
So yeah, for sure. And there are a lot of factors that go into it as well. Like for example, on a cue sheet, if something is licensed as a main title theme, like that'll pay a higher royalty rate than like a background vocal or background instrumental cue or something like that. So the type of use varies in what the royalty rate pays out. The duration does as well. Like something that's used for 10 seconds isn't going to pay as much as something that's used for a full minute or something like that. So there are a lot of different factors that pay into the rate. But generally speaking, like, yeah, broadcast TV actually does pay a much higher rate than streaming does. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. Overall, I think it's mostly because like broadcast, there's a much more finite amount of content that's being played since it works with this like block programming and things that are like actually broadcast in a linear format. There's less content there. With streaming, it's like there's like several thousands and thousands and thousands of titles available, and those are all paid out essentially something, at least if they hit a certain minimum requirement. So whatever blanket license fee that streamer has paid to a certain PRO, that's going to get divided by all those thousands and thousands and thousands of titles for however many times they've been streamed. Where a TV network, it's like there's only 24 hours in a day, right? So whatever's broadcast in that linear format, it's a bit more of a finite amount. So yeah, I mean, getting your music placed on actual broadcast TV is going to pay a higher royalty rate than being on a streamer, most likely. But at the end of the day, the actual amount that comes out, it's all based off of performance, right? Like that's the whole concept behind a royalty is that the compensation is contingent on its performance. So if it's super popular hit show that's watched a bunch of times, you're going to get a lot more out of it than something that's kind of a flop and not that many people end up seeing.
Makes sense. So in a way, it's almost similar to like radio. Like broadcast TV would equal like a radio stream because it's an older platform. It's in rotation where like being played on, I think like it's like a few pennies for a stream. Like streaming just doesn't equate. But
Yeah, for sure.
makes sense. Okay. Back to the chat. Saw a question and Hayden McHigh, sorry. Conferences to meet, seek agents and agencies? Question mark.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of them. I meant to mention that earlier with one of the earlier questions, and it kind of eluded me. But yeah, I mean, conferences and in-person meetings like that are a great place to meet music supervisors and music reps for sure. I mean, a lot of them go to these events and making like an actual strong face-to-face, interpersonal connection with somewhere is going to be a lot more effective than just sending them a cold email or something like that. I heard someone say recently, it's like people do business with people, not with email addresses. So it's like, yeah, if you can actually meet someone and actually have that connection, it is going to help you to stand out more and have like a better chance of actually working with them. The biggest one for me that comes up every year is the Guild of Music Supervisors Conference. I mean, that happens here in LA every fall or the end of summer. I think it's usually in like July or August or something. I don't remember exactly, but if you're based in LA, it's great to go to. If you're able to, make a trip out to LA for that weekend or whatever, it's in my opinion, it's probably the best sync conference that happens every year. They have a lot of educational panels, so it's a great place to learn. I learn stuff every year that I go to it, so it's definitely good for that. And there's plenty of like networking and mentorship sessions and other things that happen along the way too. So that's probably the best conference I would recommend. There are tons of others out there. I can't really say from personal experience other ones that I've been to, but there are ones that happen in different parts of the country. Sometimes they're put on by specific sync agencies or other companies or things like that. I would just say if you're looking at doing something like that, just like all this other stuff, like research it. Make sure that you know who's putting it on and what kind of people are going to be attendance and decide if it's going to be worth it for you. Because obviously, going to these kind of conferences and stuff, it always costs money. Whether it's the travel to go out there and pay for the travel and the accommodations plus the event ticket, or if it's close enough to where you're based and you just have to pay for the event ticket. Either way, it's going to cost a little bit. So just being well researched and knowing if it's going to be worth it is probably a good approach to take.
Great point, especially in this economy. But
No doubt.
are there any trends happening right now in the sync world, or anything that you've noticed as far as specific genres, songs, or styles?
Yeah, that's a good question too, and I feel like that's definitely an ever-changing thing for sure. There's obviously been so many trends and stuff that have happened in the realm of sync over the years, and it's like one time, ooh, like really like swaggery songs are really popular, and then like ooh, like really like up tempo hip hop songs are really popular, and then like oh, like female empowerment's a really big message or a really big theme that a lot of like companies and brands are trying to lean into, and then there's whatever. So it is constantly changing. I mean, I think one thing, and maybe I'm even behind the times on this, and maybe this isn't even the most common trend, but like trailerizing, music has been really popular. If you see like a trailer for a movie or a new show or something, and it's got this like brooding kind of tense, like, version of a song, but it's a cover and there are different stems or different overlays of like a known like commercial song in it. That's been fairly popular. I think it's even some of that has even leaned itself into like the shows themselves, not just in trailers and ads and stuff like that, but also in like within the actual content, because there's just such a big presence to it. When there's just like this like really dynamic, brooding, tense, like trailerized kind of style of music bed, like it can bring a pretty intense element to whatever scene it's being used to score. So I feel like that's probably something that's been around. I mean, obviously, making those kind of covers with known songs is definitely a different approach because you have to actually license those other songs. But you could potentially create an original song, that's not a cover that still has a lot of those same elements and that same kind of drive and energy and emotion and stuff that still might find a place somewhere. So obviously there's a lot of that stuff out there too. So it's really competitive to try and start making that and everything. But I feel like that's one of the trends that's come around in the past few years that seems like it's here to stay, at least for a while. But just a real side tangent too, I would just say like just make whatever authentically speaks to you. I think it's better to like be as authentic as you can and make whatever music and do that version of yourself and try your best to find a place for it rather than to tailor like too much to specific sounds and styles. Obviously, like you can incorporate a couple elements of like production and songwriting that might help make it a little bit more sync friendly, and take a little bit more of a nuanced approach, perhaps. But I wouldn't try to like step too outside of the box and like of like who you are and what you do.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to open it back up for Q&A. But Jordan, thank you for your time. This has been very insightful stuff.
Of course.
My last one is, do you recommend indie artists have a lawyer review every deal, or is it not always necessary?
I mean, I think it's always good for you to know what you're signing, for sure. Like if you look at a contract or an agreement of any kind and it just looks like a foreign language to you and you don't really understand anything that it's saying or what it means, then you should have someone who does know review it for you. That could be a lawyer, it could be your music rep or a manager or whoever has enough familiarity with these terms and these concepts to at least know what you're signing up for. That could be a lawyer, if you have one. I mean, lawyers are expensive. So, I mean, at some point, if you're having a lawyer review every single agreement that you have, like that could end up being pretty costly. At the end of the day, like in my experience, in my opinion, you don't need to be a lawyer to review an agreement and know what it's saying, or to at least have a pretty good idea of what you're signing up for. But you definitely do want to know. Like I said, circling back to earlier about how like sometimes artists don't even know what rights they own or control. I mean, that's a big part of it. If you just sign something and you don't actually have a solid understanding of what you're getting into, that could certainly be part of the problem. So again, it could be an agent, a manager, music rep or whoever it is. But like, yeah, you definitely want to know who you're signing up, what you're signing up for. And I mean, a lot of times artists don't do this. If there's anyone here that's more a music rep or that's working on that side of things, maybe in a boutique capacity or something like that, it's really good to get familiar with this stuff. Like honestly, just practice like studying contracts and like reading agreements and stuff, so you get like a solid fundamental understanding of what these different terms are and what they mean and the different language that's used to define them, because that is a pretty major part of what this job is.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I'm gonna take it to the chat before I close out. Vo Williams via YouTube says, anything you've been dreaming up musically that hasn't been explored yet, whether it's genre mix or cover?
Oh man, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'll probably think of something like 10 minutes after this call ends or something, because that's how that tends to go for me. But I don't know. I mean, there's definitely like, I think songs that everyone wants to try and license that hasn't happened yet. I feel like there are maybe specific versions of covers that I've thought about before, but a lot of it too is just like it's so case by case and contingent on context. It's like if there's a certain scene or a certain project or something, I can think like, oh, this would be really great for that. But just sort of like at face value or just in a general sense, like with a blank canvas, it's a little bit harder to answer. You know what I mean? But no, that's a great question. I'll definitely see if I can come up with something and get back to you if I do.
Okay. Weed Waster from YouTube said, is SoundCloud okay for links or disco and other looks better?
I mean, disco looks the best. I mean, it's one of those silly things too, where it's like when we say looks the best, it's really just about optics. It's really just like, oh, if you're on disco, that means you're in the know enough about sync that you have a disco account and that you know it's kind of the industry standard, which it kind of sucks to think about it that way. I don't like to be like, oh, people should pay just for the optics to look a little bit more professional. But to be honest, like it does matter. Like, the way that you're presenting yourself, how professional, how informed you are, like it is going to have an impact on the way that people perceive you and whether they think about working with you or not. That said, getting a disco account is by no means a guarantee that anyone's going to like, use your music or reply to your cold email or anything like that. But it does help. And I think as much as anything, it's like people like disco because of the functionality of it. There are some music supervisors that they use disco for their entire like library of music that they have to potentially license. So rather than having to like download and then re-upload it into their own repertoire, they can kind of just hit like add from disco and it kind of like seamlessly takes all the music and adds it to their collection without them having to do the extra legwork to like download and then re-upload everything. So it streamlines the process, and like at the end of the day, it's like doing whatever you can to make it as easy as possible for someone to do their job is a really helpful part of this for sure. So I mean, you can SoundCloud's cool because it's free, but like there is that optics aspect, and at the end of the day, make sure that whatever like any link you're sending of any kind, make sure that they can both stream and download from it. Like sometimes people will send Spotify links and you can't download a Spotify file, and it's like no one's even going to listen to that in all likelihood. So I would definitely stay away from that for sure.
True. He says, thank you, good to know. And then our last question is coming from LinkedIn, from KC Walk. He said, Jordan Young, I'm working with students at Penn State in the music industry. Any advice for helping them connect with music supervisors or becoming a supervisor?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the main advice I would give anyone who wants to break into this as a music supervisor or an artist or a music rep or anything is just like, strap in and be ready for the long haul. Be real patient, be ready to work really hard and take a lot of initiative, because it takes a lot to break into this. It's like it probably took me a solid like 10 years or something before I was actually working like full time in music licensing. Like it takes a long time, and I had a lot of like lateral moves and different places I had to come from to get there. Some people break in faster than that for sure, but this is a really competitive and really saturated space even now. When I first started getting into it, it wasn't even as competitive as it is now. So just being for the long haul first and foremost. Beyond that, like the main thing I can say is like take a lot of initiative and do a lot of independent research. It's like there's so much that needs to be learned, even just to kind of get a start. And then you have to take all that knowledge you've learned and everything you've soaked up and actually go and apply it in like a hands-on way. At the end of the day, like it's great if you can apply for like internships and entry level jobs and stuff like that. But even those are super sought after and super competitive. And by all means, like you should apply for those and submit wherever you can if you're trying to get a start. But don't expect that that's going to be your way in. A lot of times you're probably going to have to like try to go out and do this on your own, connect with indie content creators and other people that are working on like low budget projects and things like that who might need help with their music rights, and see if they're willing to work with you. And you might have to work for free on the first couple projects just to kind of get your first couple credits and build some relationships and things like that. It is a long game for sure, and you're going to have to take a lot of initiative and be a real self-starter. So I would say that. And yeah, I mean, Casey, you're welcome to hit me up if you want to. I do sometimes speak to students and do stuff at universities and stuff like that. So if you want to hit me up and maybe connect about talking to some students or something, I'm definitely open to that for sure.
We love that. Student one from YouTube says, much love for all the info, Jordan. Hope to talk again soon. And the feeling is mutual. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on Office Hours today.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me, Nyla. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming through.
Yes, of course. Until next time, guys, we'll be back next month with another episode. Jordan, where can everybody follow you if they don't already?
Instagram's probably the best spot. It's just Jordan Young 189.
All right. Make sure you guys tap in. Thank you guys all for joining and watching.